Dr. Megan Carter arrived at the imposing Becker mansion on a chilly evening. The call had been urgent, and she knew Albert Becker, one of the most powerful and influential men in the city, was in critical condition. Despite being relatively young, Megan was Albert's trusted physician, a responsibility she didn't take lightly. As she crossed the spacious foyer, Megan felt the tension in the air. The gloomy atmosphere and the suspicious glances from the gathered family members around Albert's bedside were unmistakable. Martha, Albert's wife, looked visibly worn out, with a distrustful gaze fixed on Megan. John, the eldest son, kept to himself, arms crossed and a clear expression of displeasure. Lisa, the youngest daughter, held her father's hand, silent tears streaming down her face. Albert, pale and frail, managed to open his eyes and smiled faintly upon seeing Megan. "Dr. Carter knew you'd come," he said, his voice weak but still filled with trust. "I'm here, Albert," Megan replied, approaching the bedside. "Let's see how you're doing." As she examined him carefully, Albert, with tremendous effort, handed her a sealed envelope. Megan discreetly took it, unnoticed by the family, and tucked it into the pocket of her coat. Albert's condition was serious, more so than she had imagined. "Albert is very weak," Megan said, turning to the family. "As a professional, I recommend he be taken to the hospital immediately. There, in case of cardiac arrest or other complications, there will be a team of paramedics on standby to assist him." Martha, in a cold tone, replied, "I don't think that's necessary. He'll be better off at home with the family." "With all due respect, Mrs. Becker, I'm speaking as a doctor. He needs intensive care that only the hospital can provide," Megan insisted, trying to keep her composure. John, with a challenging look, intervened. "We can afford the best treatment at home. We don't need the hospital." Megan furrowed her brow, sensing something was amiss. "I understand the desire to keep Albert comfortable, but his condition is critical. In the hospital, he'll have access to immediate and intensive care. It's his best chance." "Best chance? You think you know what's best for my husband?" Martha raised her voice, anger evident. "He always preferred being at home with the family. Are you suggesting we can't take care of him?" "That's not what I'm saying," Megan replied, trying to maintain her composure. "My duty is to ensure he has the best chance of surviving, and that means having access to medical care that only the hospital can provide." Lisa, her voice trembling, said, "He always preferred being at home. Please, doctor, respect our wishes." Megan felt the pressure mounting. "I respect your position, but it's my obligation to inform you that keeping Albert at home may not be safe. If something happens, the hospital is better equipped to respond immediately." John stepped forward, his tone defiant. "We know my father better than you. He'll stay here with the family." Martha, trying to end the discussion, said, "It's decided, doctor. He'll stay at home. We know what's best for him." Megan sensed the unwavering determination in their eyes. She felt powerless, but she had no choice but to respect the family's decision, even though she found it strange. "If you need anything, I'll be around," she said, leaving the room. Exiting the room, Megan walked swiftly down the corridor, her heart pounding hard. She needed a moment to process everything and found solace in a small bathroom. She locked the door behind her and took the envelope out of her pocket. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal and began to read. The first lines of the letter hit her like a punch to the gut. Albert confessed to terrible crimes, fraud, blackmail, and even murder. With each word, Megan felt the ground opening beneath her feet. But the worst was yet to come. Albert admitted to being indirectly responsible for the death of Megan's parents. He detailed how his ruthless financial actions led to her parents' company going bankrupt. Helpless and desperate, they faced ruin. Megan's father, devastated, became an alcoholic and, on a fateful day, drove drunk, resulting in a tragic accident that took both their lives. Megan relived the pain of that loss as she read those words, tears streaming down her face. In his letter, Albert tried to justify his actions. He explained that he never intended to cause these tragedies, but acknowledged that his greed and ruthless decisions created a chain of disastrous events that destroyed many lives, including Megan's. He begged for her forgiveness, something that seemed impossible to grant at that moment. Then came the most painful revelation. Albert confessed that, all these years, he had sought to help Megan without her knowing, driven by remorse. After her parents' death, Megan was raised by her aunt, who received financial assistance from Albert but never told Megan. He had secured her full scholarship to medical school, the internship, and later, the job at the prestigious hospital where she worked. Every achievement Megan thought was her own merit was actually Albert's doing. Sitting on the cold bathroom floor, Megan let the tears flow freely. She felt betrayed, devastated, used, and now a fraud. Everything she believed she had achieved through her own merit was, in fact, the result of Albert's actions. Amidst the despair, she considered abandoning everything, letting Albert die alone, without help. But then she remembered her oath as a doctor. She took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. How could he do this? How could he control my life like this without me knowing? Megan thought, the whirlwind of thoughts and emotions consuming her. Anger burned within her, mixed with profound sadness. I was never truly free, never achieved anything on my own. All of this was him. The decision was not easy. Her inner conflict was intense. Megan knew she couldn't forgive Albert, at least not now. The pain was too deep. But her professional duty called her. As a doctor, she had the responsibility to care for her patients, regardless of her personal feelings. That was the commitment she had made. After a long moment of introspection, Megan rose from the floor. She carefully put away the letter and wiped away the tears. The conflict within her was not resolved, and it would likely last a long time. But for now, she knew she needed to move forward and do what was right. As difficult as it was, her professional duty prevailed. Albert had chosen to make his revelations through the letter. He knew he wouldn't be able to narrate everything aloud in the room, in the presence of the family or the household staff. He didn't know how Megan would react. Thus, the letter had been his only option. Megan returned to Albert's room for further examinations. But this time, she couldn't bring herself to look at him. Pain and anger mixed in her chest, creating a whirlwind of emotions. She felt disgust towards Albert, an almost irrational desire for him to die soon. Her mind was consumed by a storm of feelings. Lisa, noticing the change in Megan, asked, concerned, "Doctor, are you okay? You seem different." Megan forced a smile, trying to hide the storm within her. "I'm fine, Lisa. Just tired." As she prepared to examine Albert, Megan noticed a medication vial next to the bed. Something about the vial seemed odd. Discreetly, she opened it and detected an unusual smell. Carefully, she took a sample of the contents for further analysis. She felt John's gaze burning into her back, watching every move with suspicion. John, trying to hide his suspicion, asked, "Do you need help with something, doctor?" Megan, remaining calm, replied, "No, John. Everything's under control." After finishing the examination, Megan withdrew to the corridor, where the family awaited anxiously. With a steady voice, she explained, "Albert is in his final days. I agree with you. The best for him now is to stay at home, surrounded by his family. He needs palliative care. I'll continue coming daily, but if there's anything, anytime, you can call me." Martha nodded, silently grateful. John and Lisa seemed relieved, but tension still lingered in the air. Megan left the mansion without even saying goodbye to Albert. The weight of the letter still lingered in her mind. Determined, she took the medication vial and had it analyzed by a pharmacist friend. At home, she spent the night awake, battling the flood of emotions that overwhelmed her. Tears flowed freely as she tried to process everything she had discovered. How could he do this? How could he control my life like this without me knowing? Megan thought, the whirlwind of thoughts and emotions consuming her. Anger burned within her, mixed with profound sadness. I was never truly free, never achieved anything on my own. All of this was him. She felt a lump in her throat, the weight of all her achievements crashing down on her. The sensation of being a fraud, that everything she had worked for had been manipulated by Albert, was unbearable. Megan rose from her bed, pacing through the darkened room of her house, trying to find some relief from the pain she felt. Megan held the phone with trembling hands, her eyes fixed on the report she had just received from her pharmacist friend, Dr. Michael. His voice echoed in her mind as she read the words confirming her worst fears. "Megan, Albert's medications are tampered with," Michael had said, his voice grave and full of concern. "I found a substance that can slowly kill a person. causing exactly the symptoms he's presenting. "Oh my God, Michael, this is horrific." "Are you sure?" Megan whispered, fear beginning to take hold. "Absolutely," Michael replied, his voice firm. "You need to be very careful about who you trust with this information." Hanging up the phone, Megan knew she had to act fast. The next step was to talk to Detective James, her friend in the police force. She picked up the phone again and dialed the number with anxious fingers. "James, I need your help." "It's urgent," Megan said, trying to stay calm as she explained the situation. "Megan, this is serious." James's voice was full of gravity. "Keep working normally. My team and I will start a discreet investigation. Don't raise suspicions." With her mind buzzing with worries, Megan returned to the Beckers' house. The tension in the air was palpable as she entered Albert's room. She checked his blood pressure, listened to his heartbeat, and analyzed the results of the lab tests. Every detail confirmed her suspicions. Meanwhile, Martha wasn't idle. Determined to protect the inheritance, she hired a private detective who discovered the financial aid Albert provided to Megan. Convinced that Megan was Albert's mistress, Martha looked at her with growing hostility. Megan finally managed a moment alone with Albert. She approached his bedside, her face marked by tension and restrained anger. Albert opened his eyes with effort, pain reflected in his features. "Megan, I'm so sorry. I've made terrible mistakes." "Mistakes?" Megan interrupted, her voice trembling with emotion and anger. "You've ruined my life. You killed my parents. Do you think an apology is enough?" Albert, breathing heavily, looked at her with pleading eyes. "I know nothing can justify what I've done, but I tried to make things right. I took care of you. I gave you a life." Tears welling in her eyes, Megan leaned closer, her voice full of pain. "You destroyed my family and then tried to buy my forgiveness with money? I trusted you, Albert. And now I find out that you were responsible for the worst day of my life." Albert tried to hold Megan's hand, but she pulled away, her expression of pain and anger evident. "Megan, please." Albert pleaded, his voice almost inaudible. "I'm dying. I need you to forgive me, to fulfill my last wish." Megan looked at Albert, a man broken by remorse, and knew that the decision she made would change everything. She felt a whirlwind of emotions inside her, a mixture of anger, pain, and a shadow of understanding. Martha Becker, consumed by anger and desperation to protect the family inheritance, activated all her influential contacts to launch a relentless smear campaign against Megan. In no time, the city was buzzing with rumors. "Have you heard about Dr. Megan?" Colleagues murmured in the hospital, avoiding eye contact. "They say she was manipulating old Albert to benefit financially." Megan noticed the suspicious glances around her. Colleagues who were once friendly now avoided her, whispering behind her back. Neighbors, who used to greet her with smiles, now regarded her with disdain and suspicion. Anonymous threatening phone calls became routine, increasing her tension and paranoia. One night, while reviewing Albert's medical records, Megan found something disturbing: falsified documents implicating her in his deteriorating health. Her hands trembled as she held the papers, and her heart raced uncontrollably. "This is impossible," Megan murmured, feeling the ground disappear beneath her feet. One morning, Megan was approached by a co-worker. "Megan, you need to step away from this case," he said, his voice low but filled with concern. "Things are getting dangerous. Everyone is talking like you're guilty." "Do you really believe that?" Megan replied, her eyes shining with tears of anger. "You've known me for years. You know I would never do something like this. I want to believe you, Megan. But the evidence..." He hesitated, looking around to make sure no one was listening. "It's overwhelming." Megan returned to the Becker mansion with a heavy heart and fierce determination. She knew she was walking into the eye of the storm, but the truth needed to be told. Upon entering, she found John and Lisa in the living room, both wearing closed and hostile expressions. Martha stood nearby with a defiant posture. "What are you doing here?" John fired, his tone laden with suspicion. "I came to talk to you," Megan replied, trying to stay calm. "I've discovered something you need to know." Megan took out Dr. Michael's reports from her bag and placed them on the table. These are the results of Albert's medication tests. They've been tampered with a substance that's slowly killing him. Lisa's eyes widened, but before she could speak, Martha intervened. This is ridiculous. Are you trying to blame us for my husband's condition? Martha, the tests don't lie, Megan said, her voice firm. The substance was deliberately introduced, and I believe you know exactly who did it. How dare you? Martha shouted, rising from her chair, anger seeping through every word. Are you trying to shift the blame away from yourself? Megan stared at Martha with determination. I'm not the guilty one here, Martha, but I know who is. You were trying to poison Albert to secure the inheritance. The room fell into a deadly silence for a moment before erupting into chaos. John lunged towards Megan, his face red with fury. Get out of here now. You won't get away with this, Megan said, stepping back while holding her ground. The truth will come out. Suddenly, Albert, who was lying on the couch, began to tremble violently. Dad! Lisa screamed, rushing to him. Megan immediately went to Albert, but it was too late. He had a sudden collapse and, despite Megan's efforts to revive him, he died in her arms. The room fell silent, except for Lisa's sobs. Tension reached its peak when John, beside himself with rage, lunged at Megan again, but was interrupted by the arrival of Detective James and his team. Stop! James shouted, quickly entering the room. Megan, stay away from him. John was restrained by the officers, while James approached Megan. We're here to investigate the allegations, James said, looking directly at Martha. We've already sent the evidence for analysis. The days following Albert's death were a whirlwind of activity for Megan. The police investigation intensified with each passing moment, and Megan was called to testify in detail. At the police station, she faced a barrage of legal questions, each one more intense than the last. Dr. Carter, can you tell us exactly what you discovered about Albert's medications? Asked one of the lawyers, his eyes fixed on her. Of course, Megan replied, keeping her composure. Dr. Michael analyzed the medications and found a poisonous substance that was slowly killing Albert. I brought the test results to corroborate this. Detective James and his team worked tirelessly. They uncovered that John and Lisa were deeply involved in the scheme. Both had provided cover for Martha, helping to conceal the evidence. Each new discovery seemed more incriminating than the last. In a high-tension climax, the police found the poisonous substance hidden in Martha's room, along with documents detailing the sinister plan. The evidence was undeniable. Mrs. Becker, you are under arrest on charges of attempted murder and conspiracy, James announced, handcuffing Martha as she screamed and protested. This is absurd. I didn't do anything, Martha shouted, struggling against the officers. John and Lisa were also taken away, their faces a mix of shock and anger. Megan watched it all, a sense of justice finally being served. After the turmoil, Megan was surprised by an unexpected revelation. Albert had left a will, naming her as his heir. She was now a millionaire, news that left her stunned. Why? Megan murmured to herself as she read the will. Albert, despite everything, had left her his fortune. Reflecting on all the turbulence she had gone through, Megan thought about how it changed her perspective on justice and redemption. The responsibility that came with the inheritance was enormous, but also an opportunity to do good. In the end, Megan visited her parents' grave, the cold wind rustling her hair. I promise to live with integrity, honor your memories, and use this opportunity to help others, she said, her words laden with emotion. Did you enjoy today's story and want to know what happens to Dr. Megan after receiving the inheritance? Leave a comment requesting the continuation of the story, and we will fulfill it. Thank you for watching.